let's start with the Bayern game on Friday. The Harry Kane show. You know, it was such an odd match. Bayern win this 3-0. It looks extremely comfortable. And I mean, at the end of the day, it was, but it did take a penalty ultimately for them to unlock this Augsburg side. 63rd minute, Harry Kane scores from the spot. Then he scores a second from the spot in the 90th minute, and then he completes his hat trick 90 minutes plus 5, so an overtime, right? Or an extra time, injury time, whatever you want to call it. Schlotterbeck sent off as well. And that's Kevin Schlotterbeck, the brother of Nico Schlotterbeck. And so, it's one of those games that seem Bayern absolutely were in total control, right? But it still kind of felt like for the third game in a row, despite their total and utter dominance over their opponent, it just feels like the attack is kind of a little bit stuttering at times. It's like they managed to get control in the attacking third. They play the ball around the box. We saw that against St. Pauli, we saw against Benfica. In the end of the day, both those games were 1-0 results. This was a bit more, the second penalty, and then, of course, the final one of Harry Kane. But we have to remember both those goals came in 90-plus minutes, right? It just seems a little odd at the moment that Bayern are so very dominant, but maybe don't score the amount of goals, at least over this 3-game stretch, than we anticipate. Not that it matters. I mean, if you win, you win. It doesn't really matter. But it also, and this is, I find, really interesting, Harry Kane really likes to stat pad, eh? I mean, he didn't score in those games leading up to this one, and then he has this explosion with 2 penalties, and that the third was an absolutely stunning goal. I need to add that as well. That was beautiful, the way he takes it down and then puts it across the line. That was a fantastic striker goal. But it just feels, I don't want to criticize it because it's a perfect performance, but it's just definitely of note that at times this Bayern attack is still stuttering.
Yeah, it felt almost like a callback to the previous era of German football where Bayern kind of sleptwalked to league titles every year. It felt like a kind of like Sunday night game where Bayern were up against a team, and it was more, we were all just kind of watching it, waiting for the breakthrough to come. They kind of crowd the box for 90 minutes. They tried to break through. I've actually wrote my newsletter this week on Bayern Munich, and my opening line is that maybe Mads Pedersen should have been the man of the match for Bayern Munich, because this game looked like it was going to a 0-0 draw before he really inexplicably handballed. It was probably one of the most obvious handballs I've seen this season. And for anyone who missed it, it was more or less, I'm trying to think how to explain it. He was basically trying to get to a cross the back post. The Harry Kane looked destined to header, to be fair. And Pedersen just kind of throws his arm up and tries to almost like elbow drop the ball out of the pitch. Yeah, it's an obvious penalty. I thought the second penalty actually was really quite lenient, to be honest with you. I didn't actually think that was a penalty call. Like I said, I didn't get to watch the game in real time, so I'm not sure what you, the subscribers, were saying in the chat during it, but I thought that was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Generous. That's the word I'm looking for. Generous. I felt quite bad for Schlotterbeck, actually, because maybe he did catch Kane, but I don't think Kane was ever getting to that ball anyway. So maybe in the letter of the law, it's a penalty, but yeah, I guess it didn't really matter. But yeah, I think the kind of general vibe I got from watching this match was that Bayern kind of huffed and puffed without a huge amount of success. I noted in my newsletter as well that prior to Kane's first penalty, Bayern's XG was only like 1.2 or something. So, and I know that technically means they should have had a goal, but when you divide that down by like 20 shots on target, it really means that they're just hitting pot shots or half chances, or firing the ball into like a box full of bodies tossing away. And I was actually really impressed with Augsburg. I thought they defended really well. I thought they set up really well. Yeah, they didn't really create a huge amount of chances, but they obviously went to the Allianz Arena with the intention of basically just really frustrating Bayern. And aside from, like I said, a bewildering handball from Pedersen, I actually thought they did a really good job of that for the most part. Maybe they would have cracked anyway, and maybe Bayern would have got that late winner. But I just feel like that first handball and that first penalty really did Bayern a lot of favours, because I completely agree with you. there is this kind of sense that this Bayern team are just quite happy to settle into this kind of structure of just firing the ball into the box or getting the ball to Kane's feet and letting him do the rest. And that was another kind of callback. And the reason that I mentioned it was not only because the way the game played out, but also the tactics, where it was like Bayern with Lewandowski under like Hansi Flick, for example, where they had, the wide players, the midfielders, the fullbacks. Everyone's job in that team was just to get the ball to Robert Lewandowski as quickly as possible. And it works sometimes and it doesn't work other times. And I mean, my newsletter this week's more or less kind of just questioning whether this Bayern team are now almost too reliant on Harry Kane to score these goals for them, because, man, if he's not the guy sticking the ball in the net, in the back of the net there, you're kind of looking around that team and wondering who it is, because I thought Michael Olise kind of was okay, but he's kind of gone a little bit off the boil recently, I thought. He started very strongly at Bayern this season, but he has kind of lost his way a little bit. Kingsley Coman came into the team. I thought he kind of huffed and puffed without doing a huge amount. Guerrero was playing at right back, which I thought completely limited Bayern's attacking options, to be honest with you, because he kept things so narrow. And then, Kompany's just kind of throwing whatever he can at it. He brings on Serge Gnabry on for Coman, even takes Musiala off for Thomas Müller as well at some point. And I don't know, these all feel like supporting actors. They don't feel like other match winners. It feels like everything is built around Harry Kane. And that works, don't get me wrong. It works against Augsburg, and he's obviously got a bucket load of goals this season. But as I kind of noted after full time, I don't actually know if I've got the stats to hand, but if you kind of look through Harry Kane's goal scoring, what really strikes me as quite odd is that it's peaks and troughs. He's basically scoring hat tricks, or he's not scoring at all. I actually have the stat that, because I did run the numbers out at full time on Friday night, and I had a quick look at it. Where is it? Here we go. Sorry. Yeah, he's now got 20 goals in 17 games for Bayern this season. What's crazy is that he failed to score in 7 of those 17 games. 15 of those goals have come in 5 games. Now, I know that's a lot of numbers I've just thrown at people that are probably listening while they're driving home from work or only half paying attention. But I guess the point I'm making is that he either seems to score these hat tricks or he doesn't really score at all. And what worries me, and what maybe should worry Bayern fans, is when he doesn't score at all, typically comes in the big games, doesn't it?
Yeah, he's start padding. I mean, that's an accusation he faced when he played for England at times as well, right? Like, the joke is always like he scores against Postman from Andorra and what is it? Postman from Andorra and butchers and taxi drivers from San Marino. I think that's a little harsh, but you do see where that comes from. And I mean, we're all praising Bayern Munich and the start that they have to the season. Would it surprise you, Stefan, that the start of their season this year is actually worse than last year?
At Bayern?
Yeah.
Wow,
Bayern Munich last year had, after match day 11, had 29 points and a goal difference of plus 33, right? This year, it's 29 points, so that's the same, but there's a goal difference of just 29.
Could I then throw another stat at you, which actually maybe backs up your point? Harry Kane is responsible for 39% of Bayern Munich's league goals in the Bundesliga this season. Do you know what stat was last year?
I think it was probably like close to 40.
It's 38%. So it's more or less identical to what it was last season. But as people will know, they didn't win the league last season. So it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of narratives out there that they're now going to sleepwalk to the title. And I think it's probably true. I think they're going to win the title this year, but they were also 5 points ahead of VfB Stuttgart last year, and ended up finishing behind them. And they're only quotation mark 6 points behind. Frankfurt is 6 points behind them now. I mean, the big difference is that Leverkusen had 31 points last year at this stage of the season, right? And they're just not doing it. But I mean, overall, they're still on course for the same point total than last year, which isn't anywhere close to, the big seasons that they had under Guardiola and Heinkes, and that's I think a big difference. So this is maybe the frustrating part if you're the rest of the league. That if you're Leverkusen, if you're Dortmund, if you're Leipzig, then you're probably looking at this and saying, oh, man, they're still beatable. and it's really our own doing that is leading to the fact that they are now 6 points ahead of Eintracht Frankfurt, where we didn't have, no one had Eintracht Frankfurt chasing Bayern Munich at this stage of the season. And I think that's a really important point to make here. And Bayern, they're making the most out of the rest of the league struggling. Whether that's because of the Champions League, whether that's because of the Euros. In VfB Stuttgart's case, it's both. That's, I think, really something that Bayern Munich have made the most out of it. Of the inconsistent top teams, they've been the most consistent. They have the most depth. They're the most capable of handling both competitions. I mean, mind you, though, they have dropped points in the Champions League this year, which is this last year, they hadn't done. They were perfect in the Champions League, right? So It is funny how perception-wise, oh yeah, they're first, they're 6 points ahead of Frankfurt, Kompany is great, but actually when you look at the actual stats and break it down, his start is actually worse than under Thomas Tuchel last year.
Yeah, I mean, like if you kind of dig up podcasts of this show from a year ago or 2 years ago, you'll probably find at some point I was talking about the fact that if you look at Bayern Munich's kind of points finishes in the Bundesliga over the last kind of 5 or 6 years, they have been gradually going downwards. They've been slowly stepping downwards from season to season. And, one of the great frustrations with Borussia Dortmund is that for at least 4 or 5 years now, Bayern have been there for the taking. And what Leverkusen did was they took them. They took their chance and said, this Bayern team are here for the taking, and they did it. And yeah, you could probably make an argument that no team have really done that this season. And we'll come on to one team who were second at the start of the match day, who we kind of had some hopes of doing that. But that's kind of fallen by the wayside. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's important. You're absolutely right to kind of keep everything in perspective right now, because yeah, Bayern are picking up points, but they're picking up points against teams at the bottom half of the table. They're beating your Augsburg, your St. Pauli's, your Mainz's, your Bochums, but they're also drawing to Frankfurt. They're drawing to Leverkusen, and they are losing games in the Champions League against good teams. And I think the most reflective thing about that is, yes, you can talk about whether Upamecano and Kane work, or is Alphonso Davies playing for a move, or will Leon Goretzka still be the club next season? But I think the biggest issue for Bayern is that those performances parallel Harry Kane's goal scoring, and to a slightly lesser degree, Jamal Musiala's goal scoring as well. He's obviously was dropped for the Aston Villa game. He wasn't fit for the Barcelona game. I thought he kind of huffed and puffed in this game without doing a huge amount. He just looked very frustrated for the most part. But those are Bayern's 2 best players, and they have to find a way to get these guys scoring in big games, because they've got PSG this week. They've then got their Klassiker against Borussia Dortmund at the Westfalenstadion, which will not be an easy task, which we'll come on to talk about, I'm sure, in a minute. And then they play Leverkusen and Leipzig before the end of the year. So they have these big games, and, it's all well and good picking up the easy points, and as you said, stats padding for Kane or Bayern Munich, but it won't mean anything if they keep dropping points in these big games, or they keep struggling in the Champions League and potentially even get out of the group.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is a fascinating development. I'm just looking at the headlines here, and the Süddeutsche Zeitung wrote Bayern Munich reminiscence of the dominance they showed under Pep Guardiola. People don't have a good memory. It's just, it's the same as last year. It's just that the rest of the league isn't as good.
Maybe they mean this year's Pep Guardiola.
I don't know. It's I find that really interesting. To look at stats and trends, you really have to look at what was before, and people really fail to do that at times, right? I mean, mind you, I think Vincent Kompany has done a lot of good things in calming down the club, right? People are happy there right now, and that is a huge achievement for someone who wasn't even the C or D choice. And his football is fun to watch. I think that is something that is also very important. It feels very dominant, even if it's not always that dominant in terms of goal scoring, but it does give, I think it feels very Bayern-like, to use a term that Bayern bosses like to use, right? I think that is why there is such a positive vibe at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said at the start of the segment that it reminded me of, previous seasons that are like Hansi Flick, for example. And it is probably worth pointing out that if this fixture had been played in the first half of this year under Thomas Tuchel, they probably would have dropped 2 points in this kind of game. So There's definitely that. It's definitely improvement. And the manner in which they won it, where they huffed and puffed and then finally managed to break Augsburg down. Augsburg might be a decent team. They're not some relegation fodder. I think they're a pretty solid team this season, especially away from home, I think, if not mistaken. So, I think maybe to end on a positive here, it's a good 3 points. Harry Kane scored a great hat-trick, and Bayern are still top of the table.